Alright, so to continue on with the last video, what I want to do in this one is I want to actually have the deviations be a control that I can use. So you'll see, you remember those people that are like over 120 years old somehow. If we click to remove outliers, then we can also remove anything beyond 3 standard deviations that way. So this just gives you a little bit more control. So let's get into it. Alright, so now let's actually add these sliders to be able to control the number of standard deviations. So we'll do this by we'll set it to xstd slider equals, and then we'll use the streamlit function called the slider, aptly named. So the first one is the label. So we'll say remove outliers beyond deviation. That's fine. And then okay, so for the min value, we'll want to do 0.0 because we're going to set this as a float. The max that we'll set is 5.0. Now the default value that we'll set is going to be 3. And then we want to specify the step, and we'll set that to 0.1. So that makes it so that each time you grab the slider and put it in either direction, it uses 0.1. It can either go 0.1 above or 0.1 below. And then, so we want to have a checkbox too, so that if they don't want to remove any outliers, they don't have to. Now to do this, we'll just put this in, I'm going to put this in an if statement to make it a little bit cleaner. So st.checkbox is how you make a checkbox, and if we just say remove outliers, and then because we're going to have another checkbox that's going to say the exact same thing pretty much, we'll just call this x outliers. And so else, if they don't specify this, because st.checkbox is also st.checkbox is going to return either true or false value depending on if it's checked. So if it's true, then it's going to execute this code to display the slider. If it's not true, so if the user did not click that, then xst slider, we're still going to want a value for that, and we'll just set it to 0. And then we'll copy and paste this, and we want to have the same thing for the y. So we'll just change this to y, and then it's pretty much, yeah, it's all going to be the same parameters. We'll just set the key to y outliers. And then, so we have this. So now in our clean data function, what we want to begin to use this is we want to actually specify the standard deviations that we have. So we'll make a new parameter, and I'm going to call this just standard deviations. And then, so this is going to be a tuple, so we'll call this the X slider, and then the Y slider. Okay. And you see it's going to yell because we don't actually have that defined yet. So let's go ahead and define that. So if we scroll up to the clean data up here, we're going to make one called the standard deviations. Let's typecast that, or type hint that just for good practice, I guess, even though I've been sporadically doing that. Okay, so now we want to unpack that down here. So we'll say we'll have one for the X deviation option, and then one for the Y deviation option. And then that will be set to these standard deviations here. So then we'll say if the X deviation option is specified, we'll set the lower and the upper. So we'll say X lower is equal to, and this will be similar to the formula that we did in the histogram function. So X mean, this is the lower, so we're going to do minus, and then the X standard deviation times the X deviation option, which remember is going to be a number 1 through 5 that we set. And then we'll want one for the X upper, which is just going to be pretty much the same thing, except it's going to be plus instead. And then we're going to filter that like we did before. So we're going to say filtered df and then filtered df x-axis is greater than or equal to the X lower value. So that'll take out anything below the standard deviation that we've specified. And the filtered df x-axis is less than or equal to the X upper. And then if those are not specified, then we want to set the X lower and the X upper equal to 0. So the way that we're going to do this is we can also take advantage of a nifty Python feature to, we can specify two variables at once, making a tuple-like structure again, and then just have that directly unpack these two values that we specify here also in a tuple-like structure. So then we'll want to do the same thing for the Y. change all these to Y. This and this. Okay. Oh, and for these else statements, the reason I want to do this is that if they, I'll explain in a sec, I guess. So we also want to specify two more tuples here, so the first one is going to be the x lower and the x upper, because we want to be able to report that on the stats panel. So then the y lower and the y upper. So that's the reason that we set those to 0, because if this loop is not executed, so x lower is not set to anything, if it's not specified, then when it gets down here, it's going to run into an error saying that it's not defined, which is why we just set that to 0 if this option is not specified. And then the same thing for the y. Okay. So then back in the main function here, the x lower and x upper, and then y lower and y upper. And then no, on the stat side here, I'm going to make two more markdown here, and this is going to be for the lower and the upper. And then we want the same thing down here. And again, we'll just change all of these to y. As I think about it, rather than setting these to 0 if the else statement is selected, what we should do is we should just use the thresholds. So we'll set that to the first one. The lower will be set to the 0 threshold. And we'll just copy that. Paste that in here. So then these will both correspond to the y thresholds. So save that, and then let's see what we got. Okay, so the age, you see we have our standard outliers, the 120-year-old. Okay, so if we select the checks to remove outliers for the x-axis, that takes care of all of them beyond a certain amount of standard deviations. We can set this to be only 0.7 if we want, something like that, so that's pretty cool. And if we check the height down here, we have 700 as one of the outliers. So if we do the same thing and remove outliers, whoops. Oh, because we I talk so much about setting keys, and then I forget to set one. So we'll say key equals Y slider, and copy that, put that up here, set it to X slider. Okay, so now we can have both sliders at once. So if we remove the sample size was at 100,000 before. Okay, so we have 700 there. So if we select to remove outliers, it recalculates and we don't have that anymore. And then we can select to remove beyond whatever kind of deviation that we want. And then, so if we go back to the scatter plot, which is what we're interested in, we can also see that the sample size corresponds to this. And we're also removing deviations in here too. So if we unselect the deviation, then we see those outliers of the people who are 750 inches tall. So if we select to remove the outliers from the height again, then it starts looking a little bit more normal. And then we can play with that even some more if we want to get more of a normal view. So I think that about wraps it up for this. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.